Sara had always been the kind of person who noticed everything but said very little. She noticed the way morning light came through the kitchen window and made golden squares on the floor. She noticed the sound of rain on the roof, how it had a rhythm like a slow heartbeat. She noticed the way old books smelled like time itself, warm and dusty and full of stories waiting to be discovered. But she never noticed herself. Not really. She was 24 years old, working as a librarian in a small town called Maplewood. And she had built her life around other people's stories, because she was not quite sure what her own story was supposed to be about. Every morning she woke up at 6:30. She made coffee, dark and strong, 2 cups, though she lived alone. The second cup was a habit she had never broken, left over from years of making coffee for her college roommate, a loud, cheerful girl named Becca who had since moved to New York and posted photos of her husband and twin babies online. Sara liked those photos. She felt something warm when she saw them, something gentle, like a hand pressed softly against her heart, but she also felt something else, something she could not name. A kind of absence. She had dated men, 2 of them properly, with dinners and holding hands, and one relationship that lasted almost 2 years. Daniel, he had been kind. He had been patient. He had brought her flowers on no particular occasion and always remembered that she did not like cilantro and called her beautiful when she was wearing her reading glasses, and her hair was still messy from sleep, and she'd felt something for Daniel. She had a real warmth, a real tenderness, but something had always been missing, like a sentence with a word left out, a song missing its last note. She had never been able to say what that missing thing was. She'd assumed for a long time that this was simply what love felt like for her, quiet, a little flat. Nice, but not overwhelming. She had never been overwhelmed. She had read about it, of course. She was a librarian. She had read 1,000 love stories, 1,000 descriptions of hearts catching fire, of the world going silent except for one person's voice, of skin feeling electric at a simple touch. She had always assumed those descriptions were exaggerations, the way writers made ordinary feelings larger than they were. She'd been wrong. She just did not know it yet. The library where Sara worked was a beautiful old building, brick and ivy with tall windows that filled the reading rooms with soft light. It had been built in 1924 and the floors creaked in specific places that Sara knew by heart. 3rd step on the stairs. The middle section of the floor near the travel books. The spot in front of the poetry shelf where the wood had worn thin from 100 years of people stopping to read a few lines. She loved that library the way other people loved their homes. She loved the regulars, Mr. Patterson, 8 years old, who came every Tuesday for a large print mystery novel and always asked Sara if she had found herself a nice young man yet. She always smiled and said not yet. Mr. Patterson. He always shook his head like this was a great tragedy. She loved the children who came after school, loud and bright-eyed, pulling books off shelves with both hands, needing everything at once. She loved the quiet people, the ones who came alone, sat in the corner, and disappeared into their books for hours. She recognized them. She was one of them. It was an ordinary Tuesday in October when everything changed. Sara was reshelving books in the fiction section, her car half empty, her mind half somewhere else, when she heard the front door open and let in a breath of cold autumn air. She did not look up immediately. People came in all the time, but then she heard a voice at the front desk asking about library memberships. And something about that voice made her stop with a book in her hand and stand very still for a moment. It was a low voice, warm and a little rough around the edges, like a sweater that has been washed many times and become soft through use. It had a slight accent that Sara could not immediately place. Not foreign, exactly, just different from the flat Midwestern tone she was used to. Southern, maybe. Or maybe just individual, just belonging to that specific person and nobody else. Sara put the book on the shelf. She told herself she was going back to the front desk to help because Miriam, the other librarian, was on her lunch break and the new person might need assistance. That was true. That was part of it, but there was also the voice. She turned the corner into the main room and saw her. She was standing at the front desk, filling out the membership form, and she was wearing a dark green jacket over a gray sweater. And her hair was dark and slightly curly, and she had tucked it behind one ear. She was about Sara's height, maybe a little taller. She had the kind of face that was not immediately obviously beautiful, not the kind that hits you like a wave, but the kind that you notice more and more the longer you look. The kind that has character and depth and warmth written all over it. She looked up when Sara approached. Her eyes were brown. A deep, warm brown like autumn itself. "Hi," she said. "Sorry, I was just filling this out. I moved here a few weeks ago and I kept meaning to come in." "That's completely fine," Sara said. She was surprised by how steady her own voice sounded because something odd was happening in her chest. A kind of flutter like a bird startled in a cage. "I'm Sara. I can help you with that." "I'm Maya," the woman said, and she smiled. And the flutter in Sara's chest became something larger. She told herself it was nothing. She told herself she was just being friendly, just being a good librarian, just doing her job. She helped Maya finish the membership form. She explained the borrowing policy, the renewal system, the digital library access. She answered Maya's questions, of which there were several thoughtful ones. The questions of someone who genuinely loved libraries and wanted to understand everything about this particular one. Maya asked about the local history section. She asked about whether they had any poetry collections beyond the standard anthologies. She asked about the reading groups. "We have a fiction group on Thursday evenings," Sara told her. "It's small, maybe 8 or 10 people. They're currently reading a novel by Maggie O'Farrell." "Oh, I love her," Maya said immediately, and her face opened up with genuine pleasure. The way a person's face opens when they encounter something unexpectedly familiar and beloved, and Sara felt that flutter again. "You should come," Sara said. "If you want. Thursday at 7. Maya looked at her with those warm brown eyes. "I'll be there," she said. That evening, alone in her apartment, Sara sat on her couch with a cup of tea that went cold because she forgot to drink it. She kept thinking about Maya's voice. The way it had sounded when she said, "I love her." Those 3 words referring to an author, ordinary words, nothing particular. And yet, Sara picked up her phone and put it down. She picked up her book and read the same paragraph 4 times. Without absorbing any of it, she thought about the women she had admired over the years. There had been a few. A professor in college whose intelligence had made Sara's breath short. A woman at a conference 2 years ago whose laugh had stopped Sara's thoughts. Her college roommate Becca, who she had loved so fiercely and so differently from how she had loved any man. Though she had never examined that difference closely, she had always filed those feelings under something else. Admiration, friendship, the normal love one feels for people who are interesting and kind. She had never let herself turn them over. Look at them from underneath, see what they actually were now. Sitting with cold tea and an unread book, she thought maybe she had been filing them wrong. She put that thought down gently. She was not ready to look at it directly yet, but she did not quite manage to put it away entirely. It sat at the edge of her mind like a light left on in another room. Maya came to the reading group. She arrived a few minutes after 7. Slightly out of breath, still in her work clothes, which turned out to be the kind of clothes that suggested she worked with her hands. Paint on her forearms, a small smudge near her jaw. She was an artist, Sara would learn, though not the starving variety. She did murals, large-scale public art. And she had moved to Maplewood because the town had commissioned a piece for the new community center, and she had fallen in love with the place during the initial meetings and decided to stay. She slid into the empty chair next to Sara and whispered, "Sorry," with a grin that was not particularly sorry-looking. And Sara felt that flutter again, located precisely in the center of her chest. Specific and bright, the group discussed the book. Maya was articulate and funny and passionate. The kind of person who had strong opinions and expressed them without apology, but also genuinely listened when someone disagreed. Her head tilted slightly, her brow furrowed with real attention. Sara found herself saying almost nothing for the first 40 minutes because she was too occupied with listening to Maya at one point, discussing a scene in the novel about 2 people who had loved each other for years without ever saying it. Maya said something that made Sara go very still. "I think there's a particular kind of loneliness," Maya said, "in caring about someone and not having the language for it. Like you're living in a room full of words and none of them fit what you actually feel. So you just stay quiet. And quiet starts to feel like a cage." The room murmured in agreement, moved by the observation in the way reading groups are moved. intellectually and emotionally at once, but Sara heard it differently. Heard it as if Maya had reached across the circle and pressed one finger gently to the center of Sara's sternum. Quite starts to feel like a cage. Yes. Sara thought, yes, that is exactly it. After the group ended, people gathered their things slowly, lingering in the way people do when a conversation has been good and nobody wants to close it. Sara started returning chairs to their proper places, her back to the room. Can I help? Maya asked from just behind her, and Sara startled slightly. Oh, sure, thank you. They moved chairs together for a few minutes in comfortable silence. Then Maya said, This is a beautiful library. It is, Sara agreed. I've worked here for 5 years and I still feel lucky to be in it every morning. You can feel that in it, Maya said. When a place is loved, it changes the atmosphere of it somehow. She paused, looking up at the high ceiling, the old wooden beams. Like the building absorbs the care people give it. Sara looked at her. That's exactly what it feels like. Maya looked back at her. Their eyes met and held for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. I'm glad I came in on Tuesday, Maya said. Me too, Sara said, and she meant it in a way that she was not yet sure she understood. They started having coffee. It began naturally. Easily, the way things begin when both people want them to begin, but neither is quite admitting it yet. The Thursday reading group became a regular evening. And after the group, they began walking to the coffee shop on the corner. Just the two of them, sometimes for 45 minutes, sometimes for 2 hours. They talked about everything. Books, obviously, but also art and architecture and the strange weight of memory and what it meant to move to a new place and make it yours. They talked about their families, carefully at first, then more openly. Maya had grown up in Atlanta. Her mother was a nurse, her father had died when she was 16. Her older sister lived in Chicago and they spoke twice a week. Sara had grown up in the same state, 2 towns over, close enough to visit easily, far enough to feel independent. Her parents were still together, comfortable and settled. Still surprised by Sara's choice to be a librarian. Still expecting that eventually she would do something more practical than a library? Maya had said, with great offense on Sara's behalf, they mean better paid. Sara said, libraries are essential infrastructure for a functioning society. Maya said firmly, I know, tell them I said so. I'll pass along your message. Maya had grinned at her, and Sara had looked at that grin, that warm, slightly crooked grin, and thought quietly and without fanfare, I'm in serious trouble. October became November. The leaves fell. The town went orange and gold and then brown and bare. The coffee shop put candles on its tables. Sara began to understand something about herself. It came slowly, in pieces, the way understanding usually does. Not as a single revelation, but as a series of smaller moments that accumulated into an impossible-to-ignore truth. She noticed that she thought about Maya constantly. Not the obsessive, anxious thinking of someone trying to manage a feeling, but the soft, continuous presence of someone who had taken up permanent residence in her mind. Warmly and without disruption, like a light left on. She noticed that she dressed slightly more carefully on Thursdays, that she paid attention to her hair. She noticed that when something funny happened during the week, her first thought was always, I have to tell Maya that. She noticed that when Maya laughed at something Sara said, the specific quality of Sara's happiness in that moment was different from any happiness she had felt before. More particular, more located, more real, and she noticed one Thursday evening when Maya had leaned close to look at a passage in Sara's book. Close enough that Sara could smell her perfume, something cedar warm and light, that her whole body had done something extraordinary. A kind of sharpening, a kind of awakening. Every nerve ending clarifying itself, becoming more conscious of its own existence. She had held very still and breathed, very carefully and said nothing, but she knew. Something in her, something that had been waiting patiently for a very long time, knew. She did not say anything for 3 more weeks. She was afraid, not of what other people would think. She had thought about that, examined it, and found that it was not the main fear. She lived in a small town, yes, but it was a town she had been in for years, and it was a town that had never made her feel unwelcome in any significant way. The library was a progressive space. Her colleagues were kind. Her regulars would be either accepting or would simply not mention it. which amounted to the same practical outcome. No. What she was afraid of was herself. She was afraid of being wrong about what she felt. She was afraid of saying something out loud and finding that saying it out loud made it different. Smaller, less real. She was afraid of losing Maya's friendship, which had become one of the most important things in her life in a very short time, and she was afraid of something larger and harder to name, the fear of becoming someone she had not expected to be. Not that it was bad. Not that it was wrong. She had never believed it was wrong. But it was new, and new was frightening. And she had lived so long inside her quiet. Her careful quiet, her safe and lonely quiet, that the idea of stepping out of it felt enormous. Quiet starts to feel like a cage. Maya had said, yes, it does. It was a Saturday in late November when the storm came. It was one of those early winter storms that the Midwest does without apology. A thick, serious snowfall that started at noon and did not intend to stop. By 4 in the afternoon, the roads were bad. By 6, they were worse. Sara was at home with a book and soup on the stove, and the particular contentment of a person who likes being inside. When weather is making outside difficult, her phone rang. Maya. Hey. Maya said, I know this is kind of last minute and kind of demanding, but the heat in my apartment stopped working. And it is genuinely very cold in here, and I was going to call my landlord, but he's not answering, and I can't figure out the system, and I don't know anyone else in this town well enough to call yet, and... Come over, Sara said. Are you sure? I don't want to. Maya, come over. It's fine. I have soup. A short pause. You have soup. I have soup. I'll be there in 10 minutes. She was there in 12. Her dark hair dusted with snow, her cheeks flushed from the cold. Carrying a canvas bag that contained, she explained while pulling things out of it, a bottle of wine, a library book she'd been meaning to return, and a blanket that she insisted was load-bearing to her comfort. Sara took her coat. Maya looked around the apartment with an expression of warm curiosity, the way people look at spaces that feel like their owners. Absorbing the books stacked on every surface, the reading lamp in the corner, the coffee table with its rings from too many mugs, the one wall painted a dark green that Sara had done herself on a rainy weekend 2 years ago. Oh, Maya said softly. This looks exactly like you. Sara felt something warm move through her. Good or bad? Good, Maya said simply. Very good. They ate soup at the small kitchen table. They opened the wine. The storm pressed against the windows and made the apartment feel smaller, warmer, more enclosed. A specific kind of coziness that only comes when weather is keeping the rest of the world at bay. They talked. Of course they talked. They always talked, but there was something different about this conversation, something less edited. The wine helped, and the warmth, and the intimacy of a small space on a stormy night. Maya talked about her father for the first time with real detail. About missing him. About how grief had not diminished with time so much as changed shape, becoming less sharp and more constant. Less like a wound and more like a weather system she simply lived inside. Sara talked about loneliness in a way she had never spoken of it before. About the specific loneliness of being someone who seems fine from the outside, and is mostly fine but has the sense of not quite arriving. Of living adjacent to her own life, of waiting for something she could not describe. I think about that a lot, Maya said. The gap between the life you're living and the life you feel like you're supposed to be living. Or not supposed exactly. More like the life that's actually yours. Sara looked at her across the table. The candlelight moved. Maya's brown eyes were warm and attentive. I don't think I've been living my actual life, Sara said. It came out quieter than she expected, more honest. Like something she'd been keeping below the surface that had finally floated up without her. Permission. Maya did not look surprised. She looked gentle. What would your actual life look like? Sara's heart was beating hard. She could feel it in her throat. She said nothing for a long moment. Long enough that Maya's expression shifted slightly, became careful. Became something softer and more knowing. Sara, Maya said, and her voice was very quiet. I think, Sara began, stopped, started again. I think I have been very confused for a very long time about some things. About myself. And I think that spending time with you has made me less confused. Which is terrifying. Maya was quiet. I'm sorry, Sara said. I don't want to make things strange between us. You don't have twin not asking you for anything. Sarah, Maya said again. And this time she reached across the table and put her hand over Sarah's. The touch was simple. A hand over a hand. It had happened 100 times in the world, between friends, between strangers, in moments of comfort or emphasis, but Sara had never felt anything like this. The warmth of Maya's hand, the specific weight of it, the way it silenced everything in her mind except the fact of that warmth. She looked up. Maya was looking at her with an expression that Sara could not fully read or could fully read and was afraid to. "You're not making things strange," Maya said. "And you're not alone in being terrified." The storm outside pressed against the windows. The candle moved. "I've been trying to be careful," Maya said slowly. "Because I wasn't sure. And because you're important to me and I didn't want to presume. And because I am also, apparently, quite good at staying quiet inside my own cage." Sara laughed at that, a short, startled sound. Because it was the reference back to what Maya had said at the reading group weeks ago. And it was so perfectly placed, and Maya smiled at the laugh. That warm crook smile. Their hands were still touching on the table. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said, "Yes." "When you say you've been confused, what are you less confused about now?" Sara looked at her. At this woman who had walked into her library in a green jacket and changed everything without trying, without force, simply by being herself. By talking the way she talked and thinking the way she thought and looking at Sara with eyes that seemed to actually see her. "About what I want," Sara said. "About who I want." The silence lasted about 3 seconds. Then Maya leaned across the small table and kissed her dot. It was a soft kiss. Gentle and careful, barely more than a brush of lips. Asking rather than declaring, and Sara's entire world rearranged itself. It was not like anything she'd expected, though she had not known what to expect. It was not fireworks or spinning or the dramatic orchestra swelling of the movies she had watched and books she had read. It was simpler than that and also more complete than that. It was like the last word of a sentence she'd been constructing her whole life finally arriving. It was like walking into a room she had been circling for years and finding that the door had been unlocked the whole time. It was like taking off shoes you had been wearing too long and standing on cool grass and feeling, for the first time, the actual ground beneath you. She kissed Maya back. When they separated, they were both completely still. Sara's eyes were still closed. She opened them slowly. Maya was looking at her with those brown eyes, close and warm and a little uncertain, waiting. "Oh," Sara said. It was the only word she had. "Yeah," Maya said softly. "Oh." They stayed like that for a moment, looking at each other across the small distance, the storm outside, the candle between them. "I don't know what I'm doing," Sara said. I haven't." She stopped, frustrated with her own inarticulateness. "I know," Maya said. "That's okay. We don't have to know." "I'm not scared," Sara said, and she was surprised to find it was true. Or not entirely true. She was scared, but it was the good kind of scared. The scared of something large and real and wanted, not the scared of something dangerous. "Good," Maya said. They sat together for a long time that night. Talking mostly. Sitting close. The storm outside continued its work and neither of them minded. At one point, Maya put her arm around Sara. And Sara leaned into her, and they stayed like that for an hour. Not saying much, the radio on low, the candle burning down. It was the most comfortable Sara had ever been with another person. There was no performance in it, no self-consciousness, no monitoring of how she was being perceived. She was simply there, simply present, simply herself. She thought, so this is what it feels like, and she cried a little. Quietly when she thought Maya wasn't looking, but Maya was looking. Gently and said nothing. Just held her a little closer. The weeks that followed were not perfect. Sara wanted to be honest about that, because this is a true story and true stories are not made of perfection. There was confusion. There were mornings when Sara woke up and felt the newness of herself like a coat she was trying on for the first time. Not sure yet if it fit, turning in front of the mirror. There were questions she had no answers to. Questions about identity and category and what to call this to the people in her life. Questions about history, about whether what she had felt for the men she had dated was real or a kind of honest mistake, or something more complicated than either of those things. Questions about the self she had been for 24 years, and how that self related to the self she was discovering now. She talked to Maya about these things. That was one of the first things she learned, but she could talk to Maya about these things. That Maya would not be alarmed by the confusion or impatient with the questions. Maya had navigated her own version of this road years earlier at 19 with less ease, and she understood its terrain. You don't have to have all the answers right now, Maya said one evening. They were on Sara's couch, Sara's feet in Maya's lap, Maya's thumb moving absently across Sara's ankle. Or ever really. Some things stay complicated. That's allowed. I want to understand myself, Sara said. You will, over time. But you don't have to understand everything before you're allowed to feel it. Sara thought about that. I spent a lot of years trying to understand before I felt, she said. I know, Maya said. I could tell when I met you. There was something in you that was very organized. Very careful. Like you were sorting things before they were allowed to happen. Is that bad? No, it kept you safe. It just also kept you waiting. Sara looked at the ceiling. I was so lonely, she said quietly. I know. Love, the word love, said casually, warmly. Without weight or drama, landed in Sara's chest and sat there glowing. She told her best friend first. Her best friend was a woman named Claire, who had known Sara since they were 7 years. Old and had navigated approximately 40 years of Sara's silences and careful organization with remarkable patience. They met for lunch on a Thursday. Sara said it in the middle of the meal. Not building to it, just saying it, because building to things was what she did and she was trying to do less of that. I'm seeing someone, she said. Claire looked up. Oh, who? Her name is Maya. A pause. Claire's face went through several expressions very quickly. Surprise, recalibration, understanding. And then, without any visible difficulty, warmth. Tell me about her, Claire said. Sara told her. By the end of it, Claire was smiling. You haven't talked about a person like this ever, she said. In 30 years of being your friend. You've never described anyone the way you just described her. No, Sara agreed. You're happy, Claire said. Not a question. I am, Sara said. I'm also confused and a little scared and I have no idea what I'm doing. That's just being in love, Claire said easily. Welcome to it. Sara sat with the word love said by someone outside of it, said as a fact observed from the outside. She thought, yes. Yes, that is what this is. She told her parents on a Sunday phone call in December. It did not go perfectly. Her mother was quiet for a long time after Sara spoke, a silence that Sara filled with her own breathing. Trying to stay steady. Then her mother said, I just want you to be happy, Sara. You know that. I just am surprised. I need some time to be surprised. That's okay, Sara said. She makes you happy? This Maya? Very much. Another pause. Then, a little stiffly but with the underlying warmth that was always there, her mother said, Then you should bring her for Christmas. Sara's eyes burned. Thank you, Mom. Your father wants to talk to you. Her father took the phone. There was a brief silence and then he said, I hope she knows she's lucky. Sara laughed. Dad, I'm serious. You're a remarkable person, Sara. I hope she sees that. She does, Sara said softly. I think she does. Christmas came. Sara brought Maya home. Maya was, as Sara might have predicted but had been afraid to count on, wonderful with Sara's parents. Not in a performing way, not in a trying too hard way, but in the way of someone who is genuinely interested in people and shows it. She asked Sara's father about his work, his garden, the photographs on the wall. She talked to Sara's mother about nursing, about Maya's own mother's work, about the community center mural and what it would look like when it was done. By the second day, Sara's mother had invited Maya to help make Christmas cookies, and they had spent an afternoon in the kitchen talking and laughing while Sara sat at the kitchen table watching them and feeling something so large and warm she had no word for it. On Christmas Eve, after Sara's parents had gone to bed, Sara and Maya sat by the window and watched snow falling in the yard. Thank you, Sara said. For what? For being exactly who you are. All the time. Without adjustment. Maya turned to look at her. You too, you know? I don't feel like I've been myself for very long. You've been yourself with me from the beginning, Maya said. Even when you didn't know it. That's how I recognized you. Sara looked at her. What do you mean? I mean that I knew the first week I knew you that there was something between us. Not just attraction, though that too, obviously. A smile. But a kind of recognition. Like I'd been introduced to someone I had already been missing without knowing it. Sara's throat was tight. When I first heard your voice, she said slowly, I stopped moving. I was in the middle of shelving books and I just stopped. I didn't even know what was happening. I know. How do you know? Because when I turned around and saw you, something in me said, oh, there you are. The snow fell outside. The house was quiet and warm. Sara took Maya's hand. I love you, she said. She had known she was going to say it before she said it, had been carrying it for weeks, had been testing the weight of it, making sure it was solid before she handed it over. Maya looked at her for a long moment. Her eyes were bright. I love you too, she said. I have for months. I was waiting for you to be ready. I'm sorry it took me so long. It didn't take you too long, Maya said. It took exactly as long as it took. That's okay. They sat together by the window for a long time, watching the snowfall, holding hands. And Sara felt for the first time in her life that she was not adjacent to herself, not circling the room of her own existence, not waiting for something. She was inside her life, fully inside it, present in it the way she'd always wanted to be and had not known how to become. January. Maya single quotes as Mural was progressing. Sara went to see it in the evening sometimes. Standing outside the community center in her coat and scarf while Maya worked. Watching the image emerge from what had been bare brick. It was extraordinary. The mural was about belonging. About community, about the different people who made up a town. Their lives intersecting, their stories meeting. It was warm and detailed and full of small hidden moments that you only saw if you looked closely. A woman reading by a window. 2 children laughing at a joke shared between them. An elderly man looking up at the sky. 2 women, hands linked, walking forward. Sara noticed those 2 women and stood very still. Maya came down off her scaffold and stood next to her. Is that? Sara began. It might be, Maya said. Sara looked at her. I started that part of the mural in November, Maya said. Before the storm. Before anything was said. I just knew what I felt and I put it there because that's the only way I know how to say the things I don't have language for yet. Sara looked at the 2 figures on the wall. Their hands linked, their faces turned slightly toward each other. Their bodies in the easy posture of people who are entirely comfortable with each other's presence. She felt seen in a way she had never felt seen in her life. Seen, not by a moment or a word, but by months of quiet attention. By someone noticing her so carefully that they had put her on a wall. Maya, she said. And her voice was not entirely steady. Yeah, that's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever done for me. Maya put her arm around her and they stood in the cold looking at themselves on the wall. 2 figures moving forward together, and Sara thought about all the years of quiet. All the years of adjacent living, all the years of not quite arriving. And she thought about how all of that had led here, to this wall, to this person. To this moment of standing outside in January cold, feeling more alive than she had ever felt in her life. There were still questions. Sara wanted to be honest about this too. Questions about herself that came in the quiet moments. Late at night, early in the morning. Questions about what this meant for how she understood her past. Her feelings for the men she had been with, the way she had lived. She talked to a therapist about it. She had started seeing someone in December, not because she was in crisis, but because she was in transition and she wanted to navigate it thoughtfully. Her therapist was a calm woman who listened well and asked good questions. Do you feel like you were lying to yourself? The therapist asked once. Sara thought about it carefully. No, she said finally. Not exactly. I think I just didn't have the right question. I was answering the question that was given to me instead of asking what the actual question was. And what was the actual question? Who do you love? What does love feel like for you specifically? Not in the abstract, not in the template that the world hands you, but in your actual body, your actual self. And now that you're asking the right question? The answer is very clear, Sara said. For the first time in my life, the answer is very clear. She thought about this a lot. about how many people go through their whole lives answering the questions they were given without stopping to ask whether those questions fit, about how much of human unhappiness comes from that particular gap, from the distance between the life that was assumed for you and the life that is actually yours. She thought about how lucky she was to have found out while she was still young. Not everyone did. She thought about the women she had known, women her mother's age, women her grandmother's age, who had lived their whole lives without this clarity, who had built their lives inside the wrong answer and made the best of it and been fine, more or less. But not free. She was going to be free. The thought was immense and wonderful and a little frightening, and completely. Finally, her own. The mural was finished in March. The town had a small ceremony for it, a gathering outside the community center on a Saturday afternoon. The mayor sang some words, local journalists taking photographs. Maya stood in front of her work in a coat the same green as the jacket she'd been wearing the day she walked into the library. And she spoke about what the mural meant to her, about belonging and community and the importance of seeing yourself reflected in the world you live in. Sara stood in the crowd and watched her and felt as though she might come. Apart from happiness after the speeches, after the photographs, after the moment when the mayor shook Maya's hand and several strangers came up to say how moved they were, Maya found Sara on the edge of the gathering and took her hand. "Well," Maya said. "It's perfect," Sara said. "You're perfect." "I'm deeply imperfect," Maya said seriously. "You're perfect to me." Maya looked at her. "You know what's strange?" she said. "What?" "I spent 3 years making art and wondering why it didn't feel quite complete. Why there was always something missing from it. Like it was good, but it was missing a witness. Someone to make it real." She looked at Sara. "You make everything feel real." Sara pressed her lips together. She was going to cry in public and she did not even mind. "Come here," Maya said and pulled her into a hug. Right there on the sidewalk in front of the community center, in front of whatever of the town was still gathered. And Sara put her face against Maya's shoulder and breathed. When they separated, a few people looked at them. A few people smiled. An old woman Sara recognized as a library regular. A woman who always checked out romance novels in large quantities. Caught Sara's eye and gave her a small nod and a look that said yes. "Good, about time," Sara laughed. Maya looked at her. "What?" "Mrs. Hendricks just approved of us." Maya looked over at the woman who was already turning away with great dignity. "I love her," Maya said. "She reads about 6 romance novels a week," Sara said. "She probably saw this coming before we did." Spring came to Maplewood with the particular enthusiasm of a Midwestern spring, everything greening fast. The air changing overnight from cold to warm, the light changing. The whole world turning toward itself. Sara walked to work through the changing streets and felt something she had not felt before, or had not felt in this particular way, a sense of rightness, of being in the right place, in the right season, inside the right version of herself. She thought about the word awakened, which was the word she used when she talked about this period of her life, the word that came naturally, intuitively, because that was what it had felt like. Not a discovery, exactly, or not only. Also waking up. A coming back to consciousness from a sleep she had not known she was in. The world had always been there, vivid and full, but she had been seeing it through something, some film, some distance. And then Maya had kissed her and the film was gone and the world was immediate and bright and entirely, enormously real. She understood now why she'd always felt. Adjacent to herself, she understood the specific shape of what had been missing. She was not angry about the years of not understanding. She had known women who were angry about this, who felt robbed of time, cheated of experiences they should have had. She understood that feeling. She did not judge it. But she found, examining her own heart carefully, that she did not feel robbed so much as found. She had been lost, a little. And now she was found. And the finding was so complete, so rich, so warm, that it was hard to spend much time mourning the being lost. Maybe the being lost had been necessary. Maybe she had needed to live in that quiet, in that careful, organized waiting, in order to recognize what she had found when she found it. Maybe she had needed to accumulate all those years of almost feeling, of gentle wondering, of careful questions never quite asked. In order to arrive at this with such absolute certainty, she had never been certain about anything in her life, the way she was certain about Maya. One evening in April. They were cooking dinner together in Sara's kitchen, which had by this point become their kitchen in the practical ways that matter. Maya's things were in the cabinet. Maya had opinions about the arrangement of the spice rack, strong opinions, which Sara had found delightful and maddening in equal measure. Maya's painting clothes were folded on the chair in the corner. They were making pasta. Maya was at the stove. Sara was at the counter cutting bread, and they were talking. Some ongoing conversation that had been continuing intermittently for days, about whether to get a bigger apartment together. "The light in this one is good," Sara was saying. "I really love the morning light." "We could look for something with similar light," Maya said. "More space, though." "I need wall space. You're gonna paint on our walls." "I might." "I love that," Sara said. Maya looked at her over her shoulder. "What?" Sara said. "Nothing," Maya said. "I just like when you say our." Sara went still for a moment. Then she smiled quietly to herself and went back to cutting the bread. The word settled into the kitchen and sat there comfortably, as if it had always been there, as if it had been waiting. Sara had read about love her whole life. She had read the sonnets. She had read the great novels. She had read the poetry, the philosophy, the psychology. She had a particular fondness for the letter Keats wrote to Fanny Brown, for the passage in Jane Eyre where Jane says, "I am no bird," for the scene in The Hours where Virginia Woolf talks about the moment a woman holds flowers and feels the expansion of being alive. She had always loved those descriptions. She had always been moved by them. But she had loved them the way you love a description of a country you have never visited, a landscape you have only seen in photographs, beautiful and present to the imagination but not real in the way that the air you are breathing is real. Now she had visited the country. Now she knew what love actually was. Not the description, but the thing itself. She had learned it in pieces over months, in small moments that accumulated into certainty. She had learned it the first time Maya had been sick, a bad cold in January, and Sara had shown up at Maya's apartment with soup and a library book and stayed for 6 hours doing quiet things while Maya slept. And it felt not trapped or obligated, but simply right. Simply like this was exactly where she was supposed to be. She had learned at the time they had argued. Really argued for the first time about something that seemed small and turned out to be about something larger. And the argument had been hard and uncomfortable. And when it was over and they had talked through it and said the real things that were underneath the argument, she had felt something she had not expected. Not relief that it was over, but gratitude that they had gone through it together, that they had stayed in it and come out the other side. Still holding on to each other, she had learned it in the way Maya slept. On her side, one hand always reaching slightly forward, as if even in sleep she was in the habit of reaching toward things. She had learned it in the way Maya looked at her work, her own paintings and murals, with a clear-eyed, honest assessment that was neither arrogant nor falsely modest. And the way that same clarity was in how Maya looked at Sara, seeing her truly, neither idealizing nor diminishing. She had learned it in the specific quality of the quiet they could keep together. Silence with Maya was not the silence of absence or discomfort. It was the silence of two people who trust each other enough to need nothing from each other at a particular moment and know that the moment will end and the conversation will continue and nothing will have been lost in the interval. This was what love was, not a feeling only, a daily practice, a choice made in the small moments as much as the large ones, a way of being with another person that includes the difficulty and the boredom and the ordinary Tuesday evenings as well as the extraordinary moments. She had read this. She'd understood it intellectually for years, but she had not known it. And knowing it, really knowing it inside the body, inside the actual lived texture of days, was different from every description of it. October again, 1 year since Maya had walked into the library in a green jacket and asked about memberships. They went back to the library on that exact evening. After closing time, Sara using her key. They walked through the quiet building, the reading rooms dark and still, the shelves full of their sleeping books. They stopped in the fiction section, where Sara had been when she first heard Maya's voice. "Here," Sara said. "I was right here." Maya looked around. "And you stopped?" "I stopped. I just stopped moving." Maya reached out and straightened a book on the shelf. "What were you shelving?" Sara looked at the spines. She could not remember the specific book. She picked one at random, a novel she'd always loved, and held it. Something like this, she said. Maya took the book from her hands, turned it over, read the back. Put it back on the shelf, then she turned to Sara and kissed her. In the quiet dark library among the sleeping stories, and Sara felt it again. What she had felt the first time, that sense of arrival. That sense of the last word of a long sentence finally finding its place. Not diminished by repetition, but deepened. More solid, more hers. When they separated, Maya rested her forehead against Sara's. "Happy anniversary," Maya said softly. "It's not our anniversary," Sara said. "I know. But it's something." "It's something," Sara agreed. They stood in the dark library, among the books, while October worked outside the windows. And Sara thought about the word she'd been looking for all her life without knowing it was missing. The word for the feeling of being exactly where you are supposed to be. With exactly the person you are supposed to be with. Living the exact life that belongs to you and no one else. Thought she might not need the word. She had the thing itself. The second winter arrived. Differently than the first. The first winter had come like a question, uncertain and full of things unsaid, full of storms that meant something and silences that were heavy with waiting. It had been the winter of beginning. Of first kisses and first confessions and first mornings waking up next to someone and feeling the enormous newness of it like cold air on warm skin. The second winter came like an answer. It came quietly. The way settled things come, without drama. Without the sharp edges of the unfamiliar. The first snow of November fell on a Saturday morning while Sara and Maya were still in bed. And Sara noticed it first, the particular quality of light that snow gives to a room. That soft white reflection coming through curtains. And she lay still for a moment, just noticing it. This light, this morning, this warmth beside her. Maya was still asleep. She slept on her side as she always did, one hand extended slightly forward. That perpetual reaching even in unconsciousness. And her dark hair was loose against the pillow and her breathing was slow and even. Sara watched her for a moment in the snowlight. She thought about the woman she had been the previous October. The woman who made 2 cups of coffee alone. The woman who had built careful walls of books and routine and quiet between herself and the world. Between herself and herself, she thought about how that woman had stood in the fiction section of the library and gone still at the sound of a voice. She thought about how everything changes, not in the big moments we expect, but in the small ones we don't. She got up quietly and went to make coffee. 2 cups. Always 2 cups. But now the second cup had a reason. They had moved in together in June. The apartment they found had better light than Sara's old one. Bigger windows. A wall in the second room that Maya had immediately assessed with the professional eye of someone who measured walls for a living. That wall, Maya had said. On the first viewing, pointing. What about it? The landlord had asked. It's perfect, Maya said. And had looked at Sara with that warm, crooked smile that still, after nearly a year, made something flutter in Sara's chest. The wall now had a painting on it. Not a mural, not the public kind, but a private one just for them. Just for this apartment, just for the mornings when they sat at the kitchen table with their coffee and looked at it. It was abstract, mostly, but it contained things you could identify if you looked long enough. A library. 2 figures. A window with snow light coming through it. Colors that were specific to their life. The dark green of Maya's jacket, the warm brown of autumn. The soft gold of candlelight. Sara had cried when Maya finished it. She had tried not to and had not succeeded. It's your Christmas present, Maya had said, standing behind her with both arms around her. A bit early. It's July, Sara had said through tears. I'm a planner. Sara had laughed and cried at the same time, which was something that happened to her now with a regularity that she found both embarrassing and quietly wonderful. She had not cried much before Maya. She had not felt much with the surface-level intensity that makes crying necessary. Now she cried at paintings and at certain songs and at the way Maya said good morning, roughly and warmly, still half asleep. She cried at beautiful things and she was not embarrassed by it anymore. Feeling things fully, it turned out, meant feeling all of them. The second winter also brought things the first winter had not. In November, Maya's sister came to visit. Her name was Diana. Older than Maya by 4 years, a doctor in Chicago. Precise and funny and watching everything with eyes that missed nothing. Sara had been nervous about this visit in a way she had not anticipated. She had met Maya's mother by video call and that had gone warmly. The kind of woman who draws people in immediately, who asks Sara real questions and listens to the real answers. But Diana was different, Maya had explained. Diana was the one who had been there when their father died. Who had held the family together through that. Who was fiercely protective of Maya in the particular way of elder sisters who have seen someone they love be hurt. She loves you, Maya said. You don't know that, Sara said. I know her, Maya said. And I know you. Trust me. Sara had not entirely succeeded at trusting her on this and had spent the day before. Diana's arrival in a state of low-level anxiety that manifested as reorganizing the bookshelf by color, which Maya observed with fond amusement. Diana arrived on a Friday evening and stood in the doorway of their apartment and looked around and then looked at Sara. So you're the librarian, she said. I am, Sara said. Maya talks about you constantly, Diana said. It's actually a little much, Diana, Maya said. I'm complimenting the woman, Diana said. Give me a minute. She looked at Sara more carefully. She's happy, she said. My sister. She's happy in a way she hasn't been in years. I'm assessing whether you have anything to do with that. Diana, Maya said again. I hope so, Sara said. I try to. Diana studied her for another moment. Then she nodded once, the nod of someone who has made a decision. Good, she said. Now can I see this wall I've been hearing about? Diana stayed for 4 days, and by the end of it she and Sara had developed the beginning of their own friendship, independent of Maya, built on a shared love of procedural crime dramas and a shared opinion that Maya was the most talented and most stubborn person either of them had ever known. She's always been like this. Diana said on the 3rd evening while Maya was in the kitchen making tea and they were looking at the painting on the wall. Since she was small. She sees something and she doesn't move until it's exactly right. Doesn't rush, doesn't settle. Just keeps working. I've seen her work, Sara said. It's extraordinary to watch. She looked at you like that, Diana said, not unkindly. From the beginning, the way she talked about you. Like she knew exactly what she was seeing. Sara was quiet for a moment. I took longer to catch up, she said. Diana smiled. Worth the wait, apparently. I hope so. Sara, Diana said, and her voice shifted slightly, became more direct, less protected by humor. I want to say something and I want you to hear it. It's something meant well, okay? Okay, Sara said, careful. My sister loves deeply, Diana said. She always has. She loves things completely. And she's been hurt by that a few times. By people who weren't careful with it. She paused. Be careful with it. I will, Sara said. And she meant it with the full weight she had for anything she had ever meant. Diana nodded. She looked back at the painting. She put you in her work, she said. She's never done that before. With anybody. Sara looked at the painting too. At the 2 figures, the library, the snowlight. I know, she said softly. December brought something Sara had not expected, a sense of peace, not the peace of resolution. Of everything being settled and decided. Life was not like that, and she knew it now better than she ever had. Knew that the interesting thing about living fully was that it introduced complications and questions as often as it answered them, but a deeper peace than that. The peace of a person who knows who they are. She'd been thinking about this, carefully and with the attention she gave to things that mattered for weeks. About identity. About what it means to know yourself. About the relationship between who you are and how you live, and whether those 2 things are ever perfectly aligned, and whether the effort to align them is itself a kind of life's work. She had come to believe that it was. She had come to believe that the most important work a person can do is not external, not the building of things or the achieving of things, though those matter, but the internal work of becoming honest with yourself, of learning to ask the right questions, of being willing to let the answers change you. She'd asked the right questions. Finally, at 24, later than some people and earlier than others. And the answers had changed her completely and had not made her unrecognizable. She was still Sara. She still loved libraries and mornings and the sound of rain. She still made careful, organized observations about the world. She still had the particular quality of stillness that had always been hers. The watching before speaking, the noticing dash before dash, naming dot. She was just Sara now, who also knew herself, who lived in her own life, who woke up every morning next to Maya and felt grateful in a way that was simple and total. On Christmas morning, Maya woke up earlier than Sara and went to the kitchen and came back with 2 cups of coffee and sat on the edge of the bed. Sara woke to the smell of it and opened her eyes. "Merry Christmas," Maya said. Sara sat up slowly, took her cup, looked at Maya, her dark hair loose. A sweater Sara had not seen before that was slightly too large for her, probably borrowed from somewhere. Her feet bare even though the floor was cold. "You're going to freeze," Sara said. "I'm fine," Maya said. "You always say that, and I'm always fine." Sara shook her head and pulled the blanket from the bed and reached over and tucked it around Maya's feet. Maya looked at her with an expression that had become familiar and that Sara loved more than she could find words for, a soft, undefended expression, open and warm. The expression of someone who is exactly where they want to be. "I got you something," Maya said. "It's not another painting, is it?" "We're out of wall. It's not a painting." Maya reached under the bed, which Sara had not noticed, and pulled out a package wrapped in paper that had clearly been wrapped by someone who was very talented at many things, and wrapping paper was not among them. Sara laughed at the wrapping. "Maya, I know. I tried." Sara opened it carefully because she always opened gifts carefully, saving the paper, which made Maya slightly crazy and which Sara did anyway. Inside was a book. Old, clearly, the cover worn soft with age, the spine carefully maintained. Sara turned it over and caught her breath. It was a first edition. A novel she had loved her whole life. The one she had always wanted a first edition of and had never managed to find or afford. She'd mentioned it once, months ago, in passing, in the middle of a conversation about something else entirely, and had not thought about it again. Maya had been listening, and had gone looking and had found it and had kept it for months. Wrapped in terrible wrapping paper under a bed, waiting. Sara looked up. Her eyes were very full. "How did you?" "I looked for a while," Maya said simply. "I wanted to find the right one." Sara looked at the book in her hands. This thing that had been sought for her, specifically found and kept and given. This evidence of someone's attention. "Maya," she said. "Yeah. I have to tell you something." "Okay." Sara looked at her. At this woman who had walked into her library in October and spoken in a warm, rough voice and made her stop moving. At this woman who had put her on a wall and found her a book and said "R" and meant it and loved her with the kind of love that is in the details, in the listening and the looking closely enough to see what a person loves before they say it. "I used to not believe in this," Sara said. "Not exactly. I believed in love in the general sense. I had read enough about it. But I did not believe I was capable of feeling it this way. This completely. I thought there was something in me that was slightly insufficient. Something that kept feeling at a little distance." Maya listened. She always listened. "I don't feel that anymore," Sara said. "I haven't felt that since October last year. Since the storm, actually. Since you kissed me and I thought, oh, this is what the word actually means. This is what they were all talking about." She paused. "I just wanted to say that. I wanted you to know what you gave me. It's not just the book, though the book is extraordinary and I love you for it. It's how you gave me myself. You gave me the right question and you waited while I found the answer, and you were not impatient, and you put me in your work before I even knew what I felt." She stopped. The room was very quiet. Snowlight came through the curtains. Maya reached over and took Sara's hand. "You were always yourself," Maya said gently. "I didn't give you that. You had it. I just happened to be around when you opened it." "That's a very generous reading," Sara said. "It's an accurate one," Maya said. "I've been watching you for a year. You're one of the most fully realized people I know. You always were. You just needed the right question," Sara said. "Yeah," Maya said. "The right question." They sat together in the Christmas morning snowlight, with their coffee and their old book and their painting on the wall, and the second winter settled quietly around them like something that had always been there. That afternoon they walked through the town. Bundled against the cold, the streets quiet with Christmas, shops closed. A few other people out with dogs or children. The air clean and cold and bright, they walked past the library. Sara stopped. She looked at the building. The old brick and ivy, the tall windows. The small plaque by the door that said Est. 1924. She looked at the place where she had worked for 5 years. Where she had shelved 10,000 books. Where she had helped strangers find stories that might change their lives. Where she had stood one ordinary Tuesday in October and heard a voice and stopped moving. What? Maya said. I was just thinking, Sara said. If you had come in on a Wednesday? If Miriam hadn't been at lunch? If the timing had been different? We would have found each other, Maya said with a certainty that was not arrogance but something more fundamental, a deep assurance. You think so? I do, Maya said. I think some things arrange themselves. Not because the universe is managing our lives, not because it was written somewhere, but because when two people are ready for something, they tend to find it. The form it takes might differ. But the thing itself, she paused. I think I would have found my way to your library eventually. Sara looked at her. You're more romantic than you pretend to be. I'm an artist, Maya said. We're always more romantic than we pretend. It's embarrassing, honestly. Sara laughed and took her hand, and they walked on through the quiet Christmas streets, through their town, through their second winter. On New Year's Eve, they stayed home. This was a deliberate choice. They had been invited to parties, multiple parties. But they had looked at each other and agreed without much discussion that what they wanted was this, their apartment, their painting on the wall. Good food and good wine and the particular luxury of a celebration that belongs entirely to two people. They cooked together. Maya made a lamb dish that took 3 hours and required a technique Sara watched with admiration and mild concern and did not attempt to help with. Sara made dessert a dark chocolate cake that was reliable and excessive, which she had made from a recipe card in her grandmother's handwriting that she had kept for 15 years and never made for anyone until Maya. They ate at the kitchen table with candles. They talked about the year. What had happened? What had changed? Tell me something you understand now that you didn't understand last New Year's, Maya said. It was a question she had asked before, a ritual she had, this annual accounting. Sara thought about it. Last New Year's she had still been very new to all of this. Still early in the learning, still assembling the language for herself. I understand, she said slowly, that love is not the same as certainty. I thought for a long time that the reason I had never felt what I was supposed to feel was because I was not certain enough about any person. I was waiting for certainty to arrive and then feeling would follow. But it's the other way. You feel first and then you build the certainty together, through time, through the small choices, through all the ordinary days. She paused. Does that make sense? Yes, Maya said. What else? I understand that being known is different from being seen, Sara said. People saw me all my life. My parents, my friends. They saw me and they loved me. But being known is more inside. It's someone knowing the things you haven't said. It's someone listening to the one passing comment you made 8 months ago about a book you always wanted and going to find it. She looked at Maya. That's what you do. You pay that kind of attention. You do too, Maya said. I'm learning to, Sara said. You already do, Maya said firmly. You know how I feel before I say it. You know when I need quiet and when I need company. You know that I pretend not to be nervous about things, and I am always nervous about things. You know my coffee order and my sister's birthday, and that I can't watch horror films without hiding behind something for the entire second half. A small smile. You know me. Sara looked at her across the candlelit table. This face she knew now that she had memorized in the way you memorize things you return to constantly. This face she loved the way you love something that is also deeply, quietly. Essentially yours. I do know you, she said. Then we know each other, Maya said. That's what we've built. In 1 year. The clock moved toward midnight. Outside, the town began its small celebrations. Distant sounds of people counting down. They moved to the window, standing together. looking out at the dark and the lit windows of their neighbors and the stars that were faint above the clouds. What do you want? Maya asked. From the year ahead. Sara thought about it. She had spent her life being careful with what she wanted, holding her wants at arm's length, not trusting them too much. In case they asked too much of her or in case they turned out to be the wrong wants, she did not do that anymore. More of this, she said simply. More mornings and dinners and reading together and arguing about the spice rack. A pause. I want to keep building this. Me too, Maya said. Midnight arrived. The distant celebrations became briefly louder. Someone down the street was setting off sparklers, small bright lights moving in the dark. Maya turned to her. Sara turned to her. They kissed, warm and certain that the kiss of two people who have kissed many times and will kiss many more times and have not tired of it but deepened in it when they separated. Their foreheads rested together, their breath making small clouds in the slight chill of the window. Happy New Year, Maya said. Happy New Year, Sara said. She looked out at the small lights in the dark, the sparklers and the lit windows and the faint stars. She thought about the woman she had been. The careful, quiet woman with 2 cups of coffee and no one to share the second one with. The woman who had lived in other people's stories because she had not known where her own was going. She knew where it was going now. It was going here. Into the second winter and whatever spring would bring and all the winters and springs after that. Into this apartment with this painting on this wall. Into more Thursday evenings and Christmas mornings and New Year's nights and all the immemorable Tuesdays in between there. When you look back at them, actually the whole of the life into being known. Into being home, sometimes. Sara thought about what she would say to the version of herself from 2 years ago. The 24-year-old who made 2 cups of coffee alone every morning. Who had built her world around other people's stories because she was not sure what her own was. Who lived in careful quiet that had started to feel like a cage. She would not say you were wrong. She would not say you wasted time. She would not say you should have known sooner. She would say, be patient with yourself. Not as a passive patience, not as waiting without motion, but as the kind of patience that keeps you open. That keeps you listening. That prevents you from closing yourself into a final answer before the real answer has had a chance to arrive. She would say, the loneliness you feel is real. It is not nothing. It is information. It is your actual self trying to point you towards something you cannot yet see. She would say, the love you are looking for is not smaller than what you imagine. It is larger. It is more ordinary and more extraordinary at once. It is not the fireworks of the movies. It is the second cup of coffee that finally has someone to drink it. It is a voice that makes you stop in the middle of shelving a book. It is a hand placed over yours on a kitchen table during a storm. It is being put on a wall by someone who saw you before you were ready to be seen. She would say, when it comes, and it will come, do not organize it before you feel it. Do not file it before you understand it. Just feel it. Just let it be what it is, she would say. A simple kiss can awaken the love you never knew existed, she would say. You are allowed to be found. She would say. The life that is actually yours is extraordinary. And then she would say nothing more. Because some things cannot be told in advance, only lived, only known from the inside. Only understood when you were standing in them. Sara stood in them now, and she was home.